All right, President Trump is touting the economy and the markets, by the way, but voters are craving some sort of win, a legislative win. Could the House flip it if it doesn't? In other words, if they don't materialize and the House is on vacation, the Senate's starting its vacation despite the promise that they wouldn't start a vacation, well, concerns, let's just put it that way. American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp, Democratic Strategist Michael Starr Hopkins, and after the bell co-host David Asman. Dave, begin with you then. They need a win.
They need a win, but I'm optimistic about taxes. I know you think it may be put off till next year. The Democrats signed this manifesto, if you will, about taxes. What does it say? It essentially says more of the same, that the government's the best entity to spend money that's in the economy, or at least better than the private sector that's now taxed. They want to increase taxes on the rich. They want to continue to spend as much government money. This leaves a huge vacuum.
But that manifesto, signed by 45 of 48 Democrats,
45 of 48.
Don't even consider cutting taxes on the top 1%.
Essentially, that's what it leaves, a huge vacuum for Donald Trump to step in. Tonight, of course, he's speaking out. I hope he hits on taxes. And again, yesterday, you had a lot of people on, Bill McGurn and others, saying that he really needs to hit the general public. Beyond his base, right. He needs to go a prime time
But I need
address.
to know where he stands.
But he could go. We know that he believes that the government does a worse job.
I know, but I don't know how far he
sector.
Wants to go with this.
He better, but this is an opportunity.
You're right about that. But, Michael, I don't know whether Democrats sort of demanding that, conditions to have bipartisan talks is the right way to go either.
Democrats are open to coming to the table, but Donald Trump himself doesn't
they
know.
Put all these conditions on it.
We have things that we want to see done. We don't want taxes.
Well, why would you preclude or exclude anything? Sit down, talk.
That's fair enough, but I think that there's things.
We'll go to Olive Garden.
There we go. We can do like all-you-can-eat bread.
Don't knock it.
Democrats have specific things that we want to make sure don't happen. So we don't want tax cuts to be.
Bring it up when you talk.
We can, but we have things that we want, you don't go to the table without any preconditions. You want to have some things so that the other side knows where you're going to go.
You'll never get talking that way.
Came out with.
Matt, that's my concern. I do want to get more into, I don't want to leave out Matt. Matt, the only thing that I guess, if you're a conservative, and I know you're one of the nation's most important ones, I'm telling you, the message I'm getting from Republicans is they don't know which end is up. They don't know what they want. They don't even know what the president wants. Does he want a tax on the upper income? Does he want this to be across the board? Does he want it to be real reform or just tinkering? That's why I've always argued, just for clarity, maybe it's time for the president to do an Oval Office address.
Right. So there's three things here. The first thing is that there's a lot of change in the West Wing and the president's staff with a brand new chief of staff. I don't think there'll be major changes on the economic team, but there will be changes at the White House that will help them mobilize grassroots support for their agenda. That's what was missing on health care. Television ads don't get it done. You need grassroots people getting involved in calling these offices and doing events, and that's what's got to happen on Texas. The second thing is, when people talk about the top 1% like these Democrats, Neil, you know what that means. That means we're fine with corporate tax.
That's what it means.
It means we're fine with corporate tax reductions, but we do not want to allow small business tax cuts. We don't want to do anything on the individual side. That is a non-starter for Republicans. That letter is a dead letter.
All right, well, it might be a dead letter, but I think Republicans should be more worried, David, for the time being, about division amongst themselves.
But there is still an overall vision.
Let me give you one big one that's going to divide it.
What's that?
Should you pay for them?
Yeah. I mean, that is, you're right. That's where a lot of Republicans have taken talking points from Democrats.
And they argue.
I would say that's a liberal position.
Well,
but there's a general view.
There are at least 5 who feel that way.
There is still a general view of, when you ask a question, whose money is it, the people who earn it or the government that spends it? Republicans, I think the vast majority, maybe a couple of stragglers, would say it's the people who earn it. That's where the money belongs. That's where the money can do the most good.
There are those who are worried about the deficit. They don't want to worsen, and they're not going to budget.
Well, Donald Trump still has that those core messages that Ronald Reagan used to make back in the 1980s about what the role of government is in the society. He's got to come out and say it, and I think you're right. He's got to do it to the general public.
All right. Michael, do you see a case, the opposition notwithstanding just some of these key tenets that you mentioned, where especially those 3 Democrats who didn't sign this letter, Manchin, was one, that they could form the base, working with Republicans to tip this toward approval?
Listen, I think at the end of the day, you're going to end up having kind of a gang of 8 kind of predicament where you have some Democrats, you have some Republicans come together, sit down, and come up with a bipartisan bill. Because at the end of the day, we're coming up on that fiscal cliff, and we have to do something. And so there's issues of repatriating funds for businesses.
Would you be for that?
I actually would be. I think that we need to incentivize companies bringing back their businesses, bringing back that money so they can be taxed. I don't think companies should be allowed to move, all of their corporations to Ireland, get those tax benefits, and then
What's your problem with Ireland?
I love the beer.
All right, there you go. Matt, the only thing I worry about with this, and I know the obvious, and David has mentioned a lot on his show, and all this notion that they got to do something, and they know very well the prospects for controlling Washington as they do now, next year, at least 2 branches as they do now, deteriorates rapidly if they don't get something done. Yet they seem to have a suicide wish. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, which is you're right. If they don't get the major promises they've made to the voters done, I think they are in great political risk. It is a mistake on taxes to already assume that they can't get it done. I think they should get it through on reconciliation. They shouldn't pay for it if they don't need to, and they should try to do this as much as they can as a Republican effort with Democrats, especially senators who are in these red states, who are in a precarious position in 2018. At the end of the day, they've got to do something on taxes. They stood up against repealing Obamacare, which is not popular in their states. If they stand up against tax cuts for small businesses, they are going to be the ones who are vulnerable. And therefore, I think Michael's right. Some of these Democrats have to break away to save their own political necks and to help the president.